Berlin Magifas Correda Francesca. It's fantastic turnout for this talk, so I want to compliment Francesca on the fantastic work she's doing to bring the whole issue of childhood bilingualism to a broader audience, and it's a great opportunity for the likes of me then in terms of Irish language to be able to speak to it again to an audience not just from the Irish perspective but from a multilingual perspective, because I suppose what I've learned over the last 30 to 40 years is that the issues that pertain to Irish pertain to other languages as well, and very often it's a question of context, whether it's maybe a minority language, what contact there is with the language and so forth. So depending on how the technology works, you may get to see what I want to say, but anyway, or I might get to see what I want to say. So I have a few prompts on the phone anyway as a backup, so just in case. So I want to speak to you tonight as as a parent, as a teacher, teacher educator, and as a researcher. So I started out my career as a primary school teacher. An English medium school, moved to an Irish medium school, and that was in 1985, so not today nor yesterday, and I suppose we didn't know so much about special education needs, particularly in the Irish medium context at that time, but we didn't know much about special education needs full stop to a fair degree, and it's really only the last 20 years I think that as a country that we've upped our game and really tackled children with special education needs in terms of the whole diagnosis and support for them within the system, and unfortunately a lot of that was brought about through legislation, through the courts enforcing the Department of Education to step up. When I was teaching in School Kathleen Maud, which is an Irish medium primary school in Tala, we didn't have what was called in those days a remedial teacher. We didn't have a teacher for helping children who had learning difficulties, and the assumption was, well, you wouldn't have children like that in a grade school or in an all-Irish school anyway. So our first task was to convince the authorities, actually, yes, we do have children with special learning needs, and we do want to look after them. And I suppose at that time the advice that children, if we referred children to be referred for psychological assessment, typically the advice that would come back to the parents would be, well, the first thing you need to do is to take the child out of the Irish medium school, because that will only confuse the child, and so on and so forth. So again, we've moved a long way, I suppose, in those 30 years, and I suppose research like Xanta's there shows us that when you look across different languages in different contexts, well, actually it's nothing to do with the second language. It's the child may have a different way of learning or may have a particular difficulty. It's how we can support the child to do that. So I suppose the question that I have posed there, can I send my child to an Irish medium school in Naíonra if she or he has a special education need? Great. That arose, I suppose, from questions that I was often asked as a teacher and principal in the school, not just by parents but also even by teachers themselves, because I suppose, as Clodagh recounted in terms of Ballybriggan, they had to work on their own knowledge base, and it was only as they've engaged and they've become more confident, I suppose, in answering that type of question. So I suppose what I have learned that the short answer to that is probably yes, and now I'm going to spend another 7 or 8 minutes trying to expand on why I think that's the case. Maybe I should just sit down now. Okay, so right, too many screens in front of me. Okay, so you kind of have two perspectives, I think, when it comes to children with special education needs, because they might say, well, it's an extra burden. I can see my poor spelling there, so it's obviously a burden on me trying to translate that earlier on from Gaelic. Anyways, it's an extra burden on the child to learn the second language, and maybe it endangers their first language. And I suppose even regardless of special education needs or otherwise, the whole notion of educating a child through a language that isn't their first language is somewhat counterintuitive, particularly when you try to convince parents, your child will spend maybe 100% of the day learning through the medium of Irish for the first couple of years, and then for the rest of primary school it'll be 85%, and you're telling me that they're going to be as good in English as if I sent them to the English medium school. So it's counterintuitive. It doesn't really make sense to what we know, because we think, just like the flower pot there and the watering can, the more you pour in, the more return you should get on your effort. But actually, we know that in the case of Ireland, certainly in France, in Canada, and Welsh and Wales and so on, that there's so much support for English in the community that anything that they don't get in school is made up for elsewhere, and also that the skills they learn in one language can transfer to another language. So the literacy skills they learn through the medium of Irish can transfer to English and so on. And the research will support that for all children, that they do as well in English and mathematics as they would if they were taught through the medium of English, and obviously they have the extra bonus of Irish. So as I said, one view is it's a burden, and then the other one is that, well, the children with special education needs will have the same challenges regardless of whether they're in an Irish medium or English medium school. That, as I said, it's not to do with the language. So in Irish medium schools, but also in immersion schools, I suppose, internationally, I suppose, there's a concern, obviously concern about if your child has special education needs, you will have a concern, because you want to make the best decisions for your child so that they learn as well as possible. I found with my colleague Naíonra in some research we did on the transfer from primary Irish medium to post-primary that special education needs is a big issue for parents. If their child has special education needs, they're inclined to send their children to an English medium school, so there's that break in continuity. And we also found when we interviewed parents that parents would say, well, the teacher advised that she'd be better off in an English medium school. And I would question, I suppose, the basis upon which that advice was given. And in the context of another study I was doing, I was in a school in the environs of Dublin, in an Irish medium school, and I was administering some tests. And there was a little bit of time between tests, so I was just chatting to the pupils, and I asked the 6th class pupil, I said, well, what school are you going to next year? And most of the hands went up, they were going to an Irish medium school, and there was one boy who, at Emerge, he had dyslexia, and he said, I can't go to an Irish medium school, I have to go to an English medium post-primary school. So again, the advice that he'd been given, or his parents, I suppose, was, no, it wouldn't be suitable for you. And I think that's kind of a shame. Parents should make their decisions, but it should be an informed decision rather than something that's maybe not based on what one thinks intuitively or what common sense might tell you, but the research might say something else. So there's also the issue of, I suppose, the charge of elitism around Irish schools, and there's that perception. And again, my typing skills left out a 1 there, but that should be 13 from 145. So there are 145 Irish medium primary schools outside of the Gaeltacht in Ireland, and 13 of them have DEIS status. So it's about 8%. And it's interesting in research we're doing with those schools that many of those schools are surprised to hear there's actually 13 of them, so they're not linked up with one another, which is a pity. In terms of ethnic and linguistic diversity in school, for me, I think it's in Irish medium schools, I think it's disappointing that there's only about 1% of speakers of other languages in research that I've done when we ask parents what languages they speak, and in the category other, so other than Irish or English at home, we find only 1%. So it would be great to see greater diversity, because we have about 12% of children who are speaking a language other than Irish and English at home, but that's not reflected in Irish medium schools. And again, that's probably part of the lack of awareness that actually Irish medium schools is suitable for all types of learners and people from different language backgrounds. When we look at Irish speakers within, and I think Claude referred to this, it's somewhere between 1 and 5, depending on how you define it. If you want to say who uses mostly Irish, it's about 1%. If you go to Irish half and half, you can kind of get it up towards maybe 5%. So it's in that kind of bracket. If you were asked, who are the daily speakers of Irish, sending their children to or as a cohort of parents in Irish medium schools, it's around the 1%. If you broaden the category to say some use of Irish, it goes up towards 5. So, why might you send your child then to an Irish medium school or an immersion school? So there's a question of equality. Colin Baker from Bangor said at a meeting in Dublin about 30 years ago, he said if people knew that the advantages that they're missing out on by not sending their children to an Irish medium or a Welsh medium or whatever medium education, there'd be uproar. They would be saying, why am I being denied this? So that's kind of, I suppose, that issue of quality. If there are those advantages there, why do we not give everyone a chance to experience them? There's a question of ethics then, I suppose. Should we deny children with special education needs access to these advantages? And then in terms of pedagogy or the teaching and learning piece, we must be able to say, well, can we identify them? So do we have the skills, do the teachers have the skills to actually identify children who have needs? What supports are needed? How best might we provide the supports? Have we got the teachers have those skills, and have they got the resources? And if we can answer yes to those questions, I think we can say yes, an Irish medium education is suitable. But if we can't answer those questions, if we can say no, we don't have the resources, we don't have the experience, we don't have the expertise among the staff, well then there's an ethical issue, and I think we probably have to say, well, maybe this isn't the best choice. So it puts it up, I think, to the schools and to the system to ensure that teachers do have those skills. So we have children, as Claude has said, Claude outlined the different categories of need that are in the school. So Sinead McAndrew, who's working with on research on children in grade school with special education needs, funding provided by Encora Omidicus Gaeltachus Grade School, for which we're very grateful, and getting great cooperation from schools. And all the research we do, we depend on schools. And I see a lot of teachers in the audience who help us with this, so I should thank them for that, because without that sort of support we wouldn't be able to do it. But hopefully you can read that even from the back there. But these are the categories. So overall there's 10.8% of children is what we found. One has to be careful, because how people are responding to questionnaires, interpret questions, can be somewhat different. So what can we say? In around 10% of students have assessed specific difficulties. So we're not talking about just maybe a child who maybe struggles with reading for a while and with a bit of support can improve. And then of that 10.8%, these are the different categories. Okay, so as I think Claude said, dyslexia, specific learning difficulties would be quite high, and then dyspraxia, autistic spectrum disorder, and so on. So those children are already in all Irish primary schools. So the question is, can you send them? Well, yes, I suppose, and they're already there. Yanti gave a lot of, I suppose, comparisons of research looking at different languages, and I won't go through all that, because I see Francesca is kind of encouraging me to wind up. But just when you look at specific language impairment and children on the autistic spectrum disorder, you can just see some of the, that there will be differences. We saw that in Yanti's. There will be differences in both languages and may need longer to catch up, but given time, you can have similar or better standards, provided there's sufficient exposure to the second language, and that's an important piece as well, that there is sufficient exposure to the target language. So, Margaret, that's what.